The night my parents stole my keys was the night I realized that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who break you first. I had worked 3 years for that SUV. 3 years of double shifts, skipped vacations, and saying no to things people my age said yes to without thinking. When I finally drove my $98,000 dream car off the lot, I didn't just see a vehicle. I saw proof that I could build something for myself. I saw independence. My parents saw something else. They saw family property. My younger sister, Alina, had always been the favorite. She didn't mean to be. Or maybe she did. Either way, the rules were different for her. When she crashed Dad's sedan at 19, it was an accident. When she maxed out Mom's credit card, it was a mistake. When I forgot to call one Sunday, it was disrespect. So when Alina started begging to borrow my SUV for a weekend trip with her friends, I knew how this would go. No, I told her calmly. It's too powerful, too expensive, and you've only had your license 2 years. She rolled her eyes. You think you're better than me because you bought a fancy car. It's not about being better, I said. It's about responsibility. That word always made her angry. She went straight to Mom. At dinner that night, Mom barely looked at me. Your sister just wants to go to the lake. Why can't you share? Because it's my car, I replied. And it's not safe. Dad sighed like I'd personally offended him. We didn't raise you to be selfish. Selfish, for protecting something I paid for myself. I'm not changing my mind, I said. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. I went to bed thinking the argument was over. I had parked the SUV in the driveway like always, locked it, and put my keys on the small tray near my nightstand. Sometime around 2 a.m., I woke up briefly. I heard footsteps in the hallway. I assumed it was Dad going to the kitchen for water. I fell back asleep. At 7:30 a.m., my phone started ringing. It was Mom. Why was she calling me from downstairs? Hello. Her voice was shaking. You need to come to the hospital. My heart stopped. What? Why? It's Alina. There's been an accident. I jumped out of bed so fast I nearly fell. What accident? She took the bus. Silence. Then, just get here. I looked at my nightstand. My keys were gone. My stomach dropped in a way I can't fully describe. It felt like the floor had disappeared. I ran outside barefoot. The driveway was empty. My $98,000 SUV was gone. At the hospital, Alina had a minor concussion and a fractured wrist. She was crying, mascara streaked down her face. Mom was holding her hand. Dad stood stiffly by the window. When they saw me, it wasn't relief in their eyes. It was accusation. What did you do to her? Mom demanded. I blinked. What? Dad's jaw tightened. Why would you leave your keys out like that? I stared at him. You stole them. Mom gasped. Don't you dare use that word. What word? Stole. My voice shook now, but not from fear. From anger. I said no. You took them anyway. Alina started sobbing louder. It was raining. The road was slippery. I didn't mean to. Where's the car? I asked quietly. Dad hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. It's totaled, he said. The word echoed in my head. Totaled. $98,000. 3 years of work. Gone in one reckless night. She lost control on the highway. Mom rushed to explain. The guardrail. I told you she wasn't ready, I whispered. Mom's face hardened. Don't you blame her. If you had just let her take it willingly, none of this would have happened. I actually laughed. It sounded unhinged, even to me. You're blaming me because you stole my car and she crashed it. Dad stepped closer. Lower your voice. No, I said. You don't get to control the volume of my reaction right now. Alina avoided my eyes. Insurance will cover it, Mom said quickly. I looked at her. Is she listed on my policy? Silence again. No, she wasn't, because I had never given permission. Dad ran a hand over his face. We'll figure something out. What does that mean? It means, he said, irritation creeping into his voice, that family handles things privately. You don't go making legal threats. I hadn't even mentioned legal action yet, but the fact that he jumped there told me he knew exactly how wrong this was. The police officer who came to take my statement later that afternoon was polite but direct. Was the driver authorized to operate the vehicle? He asked. I looked at my parents sitting across the waiting room. No, I said. Mom's eyes widened in betrayal. She took it without permission. The officer nodded and wrote something down. Dad stood up abruptly. We need a minute. We stepped into the hallway. How could you? Mom hissed. She's your sister. And that was my car. She could have died. And whose fault would that have been? I shot back. Mine. Because I said no. Dad's voice dropped low. If you press charges, you're tearing this family apart. I stared at him for a long time. It was already torn, I said quietly. You just didn't notice because it wasn't your side ripping. They expected me to back down. I didn't. The insurance investigation confirmed what I already knew: unauthorized driver. No coverage. The repair estimate exceeded the vehicle's value. Total loss. My parents tried every tactic. Guilt. Your sister can't start her life with a criminal record. Shame. What will people think? Minimizing. It's just money. Just money. It wasn't just money. It was overtime hours. It was canceled trips. It was discipline. It was proof I didn't need them. And maybe that was the real problem. When the official report came back, it stated clearly, vehicle taken without owner's consent. The officer asked if I wanted to proceed. I thought about every time my boundaries had been ignored. Every time Alina's wants outweighed my rights. Every time I was told to be the bigger person. Being the bigger person had cost me $98,000. Yes, I said. The fallout was immediate. Relatives started calling. You're ruining her future. She's just a kid. Family comes first. No one asked how I was doing. No one asked what it felt like to watch something you built disappear because the people closest to you decided your no didn't matter. Alina eventually called me herself. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it, she said quietly. You didn't think I'd protect myself, I corrected. She was silent for a moment. Mom said you're choosing money over family. I took a deep breath. No, I'm choosing respect. There's a difference. The legal process was messy. My parents had to refinance their home to settle the financial damages. Alina had community service and mandatory driving classes instead of jail time, mostly because it was her first offense and no one else was injured. The SUV was gone forever. But something else changed too. For the first time in my life, my parents stopped treating me like the responsible one who would always absorb the consequences. They stopped assuming my boundaries were suggestions. It took distance. I moved out 2 months later. Small apartment, no driveway, no luxury car, just peace. Mom still insists, sometimes, that I overreacted. Dad avoids the topic entirely. Alina and I speak occasionally. Carefully. Here's what I learned. When someone ignores your no, they're telling you exactly how much they value you. When someone blames you for the consequences of their choices, they're protecting themselves, not you. And when you finally stand up for yourself, it will feel terrifying. But it will also feel clean. I lost a $98,000 SUV that night. I gained something more expensive. Self-respect. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're selfish for protecting what you worked for, hear this clearly. You are not selfish for having boundaries. You are not cruel for enforcing them. And you are not responsible for the damage someone causes after ignoring your warning. Sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is say no, and mean it. But sometimes, that no is the moment your life actually begins. When I moved into my small one-bedroom apartment, I told myself it was temporary. A reset, a pause between the life I thought I had and the one I was now forced to build. There was no driveway, no polished SUV reflecting streetlights at night. Just a narrow parking lot with faded lines and a dented mailbox that stuck when it rained. For the first week, I felt nothing but exhaustion. Not sadness, not even anger, just that hollow, drained feeling you get after adrenaline leaves your system. My parents didn't come to help me move. They said it would be awkward. Translation: they were still furious that I hadn't backed down. My mother had cried to every relative who would listen, framing the story as if I had marched Alina into a courtroom in handcuffs myself. The truth was far less dramatic. It was paperwork, statements, insurance reports, consequences. Alina texted me 3 weeks after the settlement. I start community service tomorrow. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Okay. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, came back. I'm sorry. It was the first time she'd said it without someone standing behind her. I didn't know what to do with it. I know, I typed back. But knowing and forgiving are two different things. Meanwhile, my parents were struggling financially. Refinancing the house had tightened everything. Dad picked up extra consulting work. Mom stopped her weekend shopping trips. I could feel the resentment building in the silence between us. To them, I hadn't just enforced a boundary. I had shifted the family hierarchy. For years, I had been the stable one. The quiet achiever. The one who didn't cause problems. That role benefits everyone else. When the stable one refuses to absorb impact, the entire system shakes. And it shook hard. About 2 months after I moved out, Dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find him holding a box of old photo albums. "Thought you might want these," he said stiffly. I let him in. He looked around at my small space. The second-hand couch, the folding dining table, the absence of anything flashy. "You didn't have to downgrade like this," he muttered. "It's not a downgrade," I replied calmly. "It's independence." He set the box down and sat awkwardly on the edge of the couch. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "You know, when you were little, you never asked for much." I smiled faintly. "I learned early it was easier not to." He winced at that. "I didn't realize you felt that way." "That's the thing," I said. "You didn't realize a lot of things." He rubbed his hands together, searching for words that didn't come easily to him. "I thought you were strong enough to handle more," he admitted. "Your sister, she always needed extra support. And I became the safety net," I said. He nodded slowly. "For everyone," I added. The room felt heavier after that. "I can't change what happened," he said quietly. "But I don't want to lose you over it." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something new. Not authority, not anger, regret. "I didn't want to lose you either," I said. "But I couldn't lose myself to stay." That conversation didn't fix everything, but it cracked something open. Mom, however, was harder. She avoided me for months. When we did speak, it was superficial. Weather, work, distant relatives, anything except the obvious fracture running through us. Then one evening, she called unexpectedly. "I ran into Mrs. Khatri today," she began. I braced myself. "Mrs. Khatri loved gossip. She said she admires you," Mom continued. "Said you're brave." I blinked. "Okay." Mom exhaled sharply. "Do you know how humiliating it is to have neighbors know our business?" I stayed quiet. She said if her son had been in your position, he would have done the same. There it was. Validation from outside the family. Sometimes that's the only language pride understands. "I didn't do it to humiliate you," I said gently. "I did it because what happened wasn't okay." Her voice cracked slightly. I was scared. Of what? That if we didn't give Alina what she wanted, she'd drift away. She's always been so impulsive. And I was steady, I said. Yes. The word hung between us. "So you sacrificed the steady one to keep the unpredictable one close." She didn't argue. That was the closest I ever got to an admission. Meanwhile, Alina was changing in ways I hadn't expected. Community service at a rehabilitation center put her face to face with people whose reckless decisions had altered their lives permanently. She saw patients learning to walk again. Families sitting by hospital beds. One evening she asked if she could come over. She arrived without makeup, hair tied back, looking smaller somehow. "I didn't understand what could have happened," she said quietly once we sat down. "I keep thinking, what if someone had been in the other lane?" I didn't answer. I was so focused on proving I could handle it, she continued. "I didn't realize I wasn't ready. That's why I said no," I said softly. She nodded. "I know." Silence again. "I think Mom and Dad always assumed you'd clean up whatever mess I made," she added. I gave a humorless smile. "So did I." She looked at me directly. "I don't want that anymore." It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. Over the next year, something unexpected happened. Distance created clarity. Without me in the house absorbing tension, my parents had to address Alina's impulsiveness directly. They couldn't rely on me to smooth things over. Alina, without automatic rescue, had to face the weight of her own choices. In me, I rebuilt, not immediately with another luxury SUV. That wasn't the point anymore. I bought a reliable, modest car, one I could pay off quickly. I invested more aggressively. I started a small side business consulting in my field. The money returned faster than I expected. But the dynamic never returned to what it was. At family gatherings, there was a new tone. Careful, respectful. When I said no to something, it was accepted the first time. The shift wasn't loud, it was subtle, but it was there. One night at dinner, Dad passed me the car keys to move his truck out of the driveway. "Only if you're okay with it," he added quickly. That small sentence meant more than he realized. Mom began asking instead of assuming. "Would you be comfortable with Alina borrowing your car for an hour?" She'd say, and sometimes I said yes. Because now it was a request, not a theft. Alina finished her driving classes and saved up for her own used car. The first time she drove it to my apartment, she looked proud. Paid for it myself, she said, smiling. I recognized that smile. It was the same one I had when I bought my SUV. Only this time, it wasn't shadowed by entitlement. It was earned. Do I still think about that night? Yes. Sometimes when it rains hard, I imagine headlights skidding across wet asphalt. The violent crunch of metal, the split second where everything could have ended differently. But I don't replay it with rage anymore. I replay it as a turning point. Because here's the truth no one talks about. When you stop enabling dysfunction, things get worse before they get better. People will call you selfish, dramatic, cold, but what they really mean is, you're no longer predictable. And unpredictability threatens systems built on imbalance. The $98,000 SUV was expensive. But the lesson was priceless. Boundaries are not punishments. They are instructions. They teach people how to treat you. And if they refuse to learn, consequences do the teaching instead. My family isn't perfect now. We still argue. Old habits try to creep back in sometimes. But there's an understanding that didn't exist before. No, carries weight. My work carries value. And my independence is not community property. If you're in a situation where your family dismisses your boundaries because you're the responsible one, listen carefully. Responsibility does not mean sacrifice without limit. Being strong does not mean being silent. And loving your family does not mean letting them dismantle what you've built. That night, my parents thought they were doing something small, borrowing keys, bending a rule. Instead, they triggered the one thing they feared most. Change. I lost a car. They lost control. And in the space left behind, something healthier finally had room to grow.